finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Hey, what? You're cutting me off? You're just jumping in. You're so excited, Tim.
I am very excited about today's guest.
Yeah, well, I know you guys are going to be happy to hear from our friend Ryan Heath again. He was on in January 26th, episode 56, giving us some really good information on COVID and the law and his new project that he started, his nonprofit called the Gavel Project, which he's here to update us about and what has transpired over the past couple of months. If you haven't been following Ryan and the Gavel Project on Instagram, you should be, because he's been doing some really good work in the state of California, helping kids especially. The Gavel Project specifically is a legal organization that exists to fight unethical government and employer mandates and protect the freedom of Americans, especially children. And they've been really focused on ending mask mandates and allowing kids to go back to school with the choice to not wear masks. But that's been a bit of a struggle.
And this is the stuff that's gone on in the last 2 months. It'll just blow your mind.
Yeah.
Like how, I mean, this is a fairly long interview, but it needs to be, because you have to get into some of the nuance of what's going on, and it really is crazy.
Yeah.
My favorite line is he sees what's gone on with some of these mandates as child abuse, and he says, "I want the child. My goal is to make the child abusers homeless."
Ironically, we just came back from Cali on a little road trip ourselves, a 10-day excursion, and it was pleasantly pleasant because in the locations that we were at, masks were pretty much gone, burned, laying on the ground in litter, sadly. And so
plugging whales' blowholes.
Pretty much, yeah. So let's hope that he can impact some change where he's been working and with the locals to get rid of this stupid maskness that's going on still in schools.
And kids, it's just that whatever. Yeah. The stuff for kids is just crazy.
But before we just jump right into that interview, we need to thank our sponsor again, who is MR Insurance, a small business that helps physicians with their disability insurance needs. Michael L. Relvis is a CFP professional and insurance agent committed to helping physicians nationwide with their term, life, and disability insurance needs. He provides an objective, transparent, and education-focused process that aims to help physicians make prudent decisions and avoid overcomplicating things. He exclusively offers own occupation disability insurance policies for residents, fellows, and attending physicians. We really like Michael, and we know he's got your best interest at heart when it comes to disability insurance. So we know he'd be happy to help you with whatever your needs are. It's very easy to get a hold of him. You can find him at MR Insurance, or I'll link the website, or contact him at 1-800-817-4522. That's 1-800-817-4522. And reach out to him anytime. He'll get back to you right away with a quote.
We like Mike. Okay. On with the show. We are super excited to have Ryan Heath from the Gavel Project back with us for an update on what's going on in the legal world with regards to COVID. He's been involved legally in Orange County, in Irvine, been involved with some protests there, seen some really amazing things. And
peaceful protests, though,
of course,
right?
peaceful protests.
Yeah.
They don't light any
protests.
Don't light anything on fire. And
Never.
as we've been attempting to highlight courage this year in the podcast, he has some really amazing stories of some very courageous young people that will inspire all of us. All right, Ryan, thank you, and welcome back to BS Free MD.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here. Um, it's been a weird couple of weeks since I've last really been on this show and a few others as well. So I'm kind of reemerging from a weird few trips out to California, and I'd be happy to tell you all about what's been happening out there to the kids. It's quite atrocious.
Yeah, I've been following you on Instagram, although I missed the last week. We were on vacation and I kind of just
Oh,
unplugged
good
from
for
a lot
you.
of social media. So
Yeah.
actually, we were, I hate to say, traveling through California as well, leisurely, and it was pretty good because the masks weren't dropped and so forth. But yeah, I've
Mhm.
been following what was going on initially with you in California on IG and what was happening in the schools with the mask mandates, and I'm excited to catch up with you to find out what's happening in the last little bit. So tell everybody, because last you were on, you hadn't even headed down there yet, and so take us through what's been going on since you arrived in California.
Yeah, well, I guess the where I'll start, and I'm kind of sad to report this. I have officially become now a civil rights activist, and it's 2022. Um, I'm I never thought as a kid growing up in America that that would even be an option as a career path for someone like me or anyone really. I thought we'd solved that crap a long time ago. I thought that the people who um, sat down on the buses back in the 1950s, like Rosa Parks, and the people who had dogs sicked on them for protesting, the original cool, the founders of the ACLU, not the people who run that organization now. Um, I thought those folks who had put in the time, the blood, the effort, like all the things they went through for us, I thought that had done something. Apparently it hadn't. And yeah, so I've been out in California teaching kids how to engage in civil disobedience, and done so successfully a few times. I've been speaking. I've been basically setting up lawsuits, and now we're in the stages of actually moving forward in litigation. We've retained counsel for 5 school districts that we'll be bringing civil lawsuits against, or we're moving forward in those right now with the process. And we intend to use these as an opportunity to demonstrate to the world these cases will be jury trials. And we hope to show the world what it is that happened out there, which is nothing short of state sanctioned and state action here on behalf of state officials, the very folks who were charged with protecting the health and safety of our children on a daily basis, uh, have engaged in child abuse. There's nothing short of um, calling it child abuse that's appropriate.
So, what specific mandates? Just update us because we have listeners from all over the place. We actually checked our syndicator, and we have had listeners in Russia, which always seems to blow my mind. I wonder, maybe it's just Putin. I listen to BS3MD. I have the vodka, then I get angry and want to kill.
It's the one world economy keeping tabs on
I don't
us,
know.
I guess.
But anyways, because we have varied listeners, there's different mandates. There's states that have mandates. There's provinces in Canada that have none, essentially now.
Mm-hmm.
What specifically is going on in California that has kind of launched this the legal side? Is it the mask mandates? Is it the vaccine mandates? Who's mandated? How old, etc.?
Yeah, so let's take a step back here and walk through the timeline so the listeners can understand how everything kind of unfolded. We remember, everyone remembers 2 weeks to stop flatten the curve, right? That was cute.
What? Yeah.
Well, flash forward to basically the 14th of this month, the 12th of this month, around that timeline. Kids in California have been basically in masks periodically throughout that time. For the times that they've been in schools, basically the entire time they've been in masks. And that was lifted the quote unquote guidelines, the mandatory quote unquote guidelines from the California Department of Public Health, at least for children in school settings in California, was lifted very, very recently. These kids have been wearing masks on their faces all day, every day, for the past 2 years, essentially, while they've been in class. And that is the primary issue that I have been focusing on right now, because that has caused, and we have some of the most shocking evidence that we'll be presenting to these juries and to the world through periodic releases here with different strategic partners that we're working with now, and we'll be doing some big stuff here soon in that regard. We're going to demonstrate to the world what happened to these kids, which is basically autistic kids being forced to wear masks by teachers all day, who now are 7-year-old kids waking up with night terrors, screaming in the middle of the night, every night. The parents are dealing with this stress that doesn't need to be there. Kids that have ADHD, like myself, I had a learning disability, and so going through school was very difficult for me. I was frequently the last person in the library in law school because I had to read things over and over again to retain them. It's just how I have to operate. And so for me, distractions are very prevalent when I'm trying to study. And for a kid trying to study with a mask on their face who has a condition similar to mine, I can't even imagine. It's a full-on impediment to learning. And so when I heard they were going to be continuing them through January, and basically they had no plans to remove them, this was early January, I knew that, one, this was a strong argument to be made from a constitutional perspective, because we're talking about a free speech issue in school. It's been decided already by the Supreme Court that wearing an article of clothing, or whether to wear an article of clothing as a condition of attending school for disciplinary reasons, there are limitations on what the state can and cannot do relative to free speech, because it's already been decided. Wearing an article of clothing is an act of free speech. A mask is an article of clothing. It's certainly not an approved medical device. It's an experimental use, authorized medical device for children in particular. And it says on the box of most of these cloth masks, the masks these kids are wearing every day, if they just read the warning labels, they would realize that they have no applicability to COVID-19. And it's the craziest thing. These kids have been brainwashed by their teachers. They have been told they are vile and disgusting. These are 14-year-old kids who have teachers yelling at them because they don't want to have to breathe through their spit all day. They take their mask off. The teachers tell them they're vile and disgusting. We have teachers telling 5, 6, 7-year-old kids they're going to kill the teachers and kill the teachers' grandparents and kill their friends and their families because they don't want to wear masks in school.
So do you have that documented?
Yeah, we have evidence of all of this. We'll be bringing forward kids that go. I mean, some of the cases we had kids going to school every day during the month of February at Saddleback Valley Unified School District. That's one of the cases we're taking on here. These kids are in elementary school, mind you. They show up to school in the mornings. They decide they don't want to wear a mask. And so the principal's policy, the school district's policy, is to basically take these kids, stick them outside all day. They sat outside every day for the month of February. They were marked unexcused by the school. Their parents take them to school, drop them off. They get marked as unexcused. Their parents are now getting truancy letters in the mail. This is state discrimination by state actors against individuals engaged in free speech. Every single person who is taking action on behalf of the state against these individuals, including we have in some instances Orange County sheriff's deputies having taken action against individuals. We have the sheriff as well, apparently is sanctioning this. All of these folks, and this is an opportunity for them to really get ahead of what I think was just an internal mistake. But all of these folks have exposed themselves personally to liability under the Civil Rights Act, because the standard's very clear. So this is what the Supreme Court says for free speech, just so everyone knows. I'm a constitutional attorney. I run a nonprofit called the Gavel Project. You should check us out on Instagram if you want to see what's been going on. It's at the Gavel Project. Basically, if you take your mask off, the question for the court in these types of circumstances is whether that is sufficiently expressive, given the circumstances, to be understood by a reasonable person as meaning something that the person's trying to convey. It's like if the standard, or if your speech is inherently expressive to the average observer, then it's free speech. Taking a mask off in our day and time, given our current circumstances, for a student in class, it sends a pretty clear message of protest, especially when the policy concerns forcing a child to wear a mask. And you can't ratchet down a Supreme Court standard. Okay, that's the standard set by the Supreme Court. So these schools are basically trying to suspend these kids now, and they're saying that they're suspended for violating the California Education Code. This is and you can't, and they're saying basically under 48,900 Code Section K, these kids are engaged in willful disruption or willful disobedience of school authority. Well, for those suspensions to be valid, you have to show that the kids have violated the law somehow. And here, the Supreme Court says, and going back to the ratcheting thing, the Supreme Court says that the only way your free speech can be curtailed in these types of situations, in the school context, is if you intend to disrupt the educational process, or if your conduct violates the rights of others, meaning their civil rights, their right to be free of harassment, discrimination, things like that. And in this context, the act of removing a mask is not disruptive. You can't suspend a student for violating a California Education Code that itself would violate the Constitution. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, for sure.
These schools are trying to suspend these kids for willful disobedience, and they can't do it because the standard they're setting for themselves is short of what the constitutional standard requires. They have to meet that standard, or they can't suspend them.
Right. So aren't they going to come back and say that if Billy doesn't wear a mask and everyone else is wearing a mask, Billy is putting everyone at risk by not being masked, ergo he is disrupting education? I mean, that seems like the only argument that they have, even though from a scientific perspective, it's especially with a cloth mask on a 5-year-old, which is basically just a booger catcher.
Yeah.
Which is what they're wearing. Yeah.
Which is what they're wearing. I mean, so I think you have to, I mean, there has to be limits on this, right? Like could I go to school and not ever wear a shirt and have my hairy man boobs disturbing class?
So yeah, that's a good question. That was actually one of the issues that was brought up. So let's tell a story, I guess, to provide some context and talk about hairy man boobs in class and whether or not that's disruptive to the educational process here.
I didn't want to be a misogynist, so I used myself as the example.
Hey man, I'm a dude too. I've got a hairy chest. There's nothing wrong with that.
I refrain from comment on this.
Hey, so so disruptive hairy men. So basically, I had this conversation, this very conversation with a sheriff's deputy from Orange County. One of the things that happened, let's tell the story of how I ended up in California and why I was there for so long. So I had an idea. This all kind of started with an idea, and it basically stems back from an amicus curiae brief that I filed in support of the Daily Wire, Bentkey Ventures, back in November when I had first started this organization. And the argument that I explained to you, this expressive conduct argument, I was saying in that brief that was rejected by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, by the way, they wouldn't even consider the argument. The motion to appear as amicus curiae was denied. And I don't know why. I didn't really follow up too much. I speculated to a few things, but that's relevant now. Basically, I made the argument that refusing to comply with the OSHA mandate was expressive conduct on behalf of a citizen entity engaged in free speech. That's what they're doing by refusing to comply and abide by the OSHA policies with respect to their employees. And so that standard is really beneficial for a number of reasons. When you bring a suit against state actors who discriminate against you for engaging in free speech under the Civil Rights Act, that's Title 42, Section 1983 of the U.S. Code, if there are damages involved, like let's say psychological trauma to a child, where that child now has night terrors, the child has to go get counseling. We have kids with that are as young as 5 years old who went in to school with a normal trajectory and now have speech impediments because of the masking. When you have to pay for the resources to get your kids back on track, or if you're missing work because the quarantine laws for the state require that if your kid is exposed to a classmate, if they're unvaccinated, they have to go home for 10 days. But if they're vaccinated, they get to stay. And this happens to you multiple times. So you're missing work, you're losing the value of your earnings, all of those things. You can file personal lawsuits against the state actors under the Civil Rights Act, under Title 42, Section 1983. So we're no longer just suing the government in these situations where the government actors discriminate against you. We're suing the individuals personally. It's the same thing that would happen if a police officer broke down your door in violation of your Fourth Amendment rights and caused you monetary damage to your home without a valid warrant. It's the same theory of law.
To me, that seems to, I wouldn't say make more sense, but would pull more weight. And because I guess I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure, I think our listeners would have similar ones. So first off, going back, reeling it way back to the whole state of California, because I know they're not alone, because I know this is happening in our home state. I mean, I have a friend who, her kids have been masked the whole time they're in elementary school and will remain in masks till the end of this school year. They're not lifting it, even though the mask mandate in Oregon is lifted. The kids still have to wear them till the end of this school year. Her kids are not vaccinated and they have to eat lunch outside in the cold.
Don't get vaccinated. And that's disgusting that they have to put them outside in the cold.
So they're eating outside in the rain, it's Oregon.
But
it's cold.
It gets better. That's a private school.
Yes. So that's happening, and they're outliers, and the kids, look down on them because they're, outliers, and
they're paying money to these people to do this to their children.
Right, exactly. And so just don't get me started. But I know it's happening in New York State to kids going to preschool. The little ones have to wear these masks. So I guess my thing is, if the education is a state-run entity, correct? Or am I incorrect? If education is, a state-run entity, and California as a state decides that this is what they want to do, can you take this to the Supreme Court, and can they overrule what's happening in California? I mean, is there a way? Because then, yes, they withhold funds, or okay. That's what I'm wondering.
That's the whole point of what I'm doing,
right?
With my organization. It's funny. I was in DC taking a class that was taught by Justice Alito on constitutional interpretation in January of 2020. I was still in law school. I graduated during the COVID era, and then took the bar exam in a mask. And I intend to bring one of these cases. Actually, I have a few more that I'm conjuring up as well, and not only in California but other states now. Or as long as we can have the funds that come in, and right now we're just getting to that point with fundraising. And by the way, we need your support. If you're out there, please go to thegavelproject.com and give us whatever you can, because we're trying to help as many kids as we possibly can, and the vaccine injured, and to take on big pharma, and to do everything we can to fight bull crap in society. That's what our organization does. And but going back to the question here, yes, state actors is who we're dealing with. And when you violate the Constitution as a state actor, the question is for the Supreme Court because it's a federal issue. It doesn't matter what the California laws say, and that's why I was saying that this education code that they're citing, like it in Capistrano, for example, very specifically, willful disobedience is what they're trying to say that one of our clients was being suspended for. I flew out to California on the 13th of February, and I met with a group of parents and kids in a home in the Capistrano Unified School District area. And one of the students there, his name is Troy. And this young man and his family, basically, I found them because I had this idea that if you take a mask off, you're engaged in free speech. And I'm so convinced of this fact, and I'm so confident in the process for filing a lawsuit under this standard that I'm willing to tell parents that they should have their kids willfully defy the schools and the police officers when they come to school, and even invite the police officers to arrest the students and submit peacefully to arrest, to challenge them, basically to call the bluff of the schools, because this argument, I believe, is so strong and so real. And so I found this kid, Troy, and his family, his parents, that really true patriots. Basically, I asked them, like, hey, are you willing to let your child, and Troy, are you willing to get expelled to fight this? And he said, yes. I said, are you willing to get arrested to fight this? And he said, yes. I said, good. Well, here's what the law says. And so it's pretty clear. Let me just explain the laws in California so everyone can understand what we're dealing with here. It's the schools aren't even following their own California state law when they're suspending these students. They're violating their own laws, their own policies, even from a school district perspective. So just for a quick second, the California Constitution basically states you have a right as a student to an in-person education. That's what it says. All right. There are only two reasons under the California Education Code that you can be removed from campus legally. All right. The first is your parental consent. Your parents basically remove you from the campus for whatever reason. They enroll you and they have to consent. There's a reason. All the schools who have forced children into online learning programs have violated the law. You cannot force a child into an online learning program in California. Your parents had to have signed something for that to have happened validly. And likely they did. They coerced you and bullied you into this. That's one way. So you consent. The second way is if you are what's called a clear and present danger. And that's defined by California Education Code 48900. And that means that term means clear and present danger. You are a threat of somehow to yourself or to another student. And so that's guns, drugs, threats of violence, paraphernalia. If you somehow present a threat to yourself or a classmate, physically or psychologically in some instances, you can be removed against your will by the state. That's what the police officers can show up and drag you off campus for. And that's it.
Well, what if I show up to school naked?
Yeah, so back to the hairy man scenario. So they also have this provision in there, and it's California Education Code 48900K. And it says that you as a school can remove a student if they violate or if they willfully defy a valid order of authority. That means the order of authority needs to comply with the law. It needs to be a valid legal order of authority. And we can talk about the standards, the guideline mandates, all of that in a second. We're getting there. But that's the standard. And even then.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say, so basically we can imply that you can't just show up naked in public anywhere at your place
Correct.
of employment, on the street, even in Vegas. So therefore you can't do it at school.
So,
Yes.
But people get kicked out for the weirdest things. Like you have the Jesus is my homeboy t-shirt And
Yeah, bong
you know,
rips for Jesus is a thing. Have you guys heard about that case up in Alaska?
which one? I'm sorry.
Bong rips for Jesus. Have you heard about this story?
No, that
Okay,
sounds
let's
hilarious.
talk about school speech and what's permissible and what's impermissible as far as student conduct goes. So the first case in the progeny of the line of school speech here is Tinker v. Des Moines, and that's a case that concerned a few students in Iowa that basically decided in the 1960s they wanted to wear black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. They wanted to wear these to school. And the school decided, they actually adopted a policy forbidding the wearing of black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. And these kids did it anyway. They were disciplined, and there was a claim for basically nominal monetary damages and for injunctive relief brought under the Civil Rights Act, under Title 42, Section 1983 of the U.S. Code. And this case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the court said that, this is a quote, students and teachers don't check their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. That was the majority opinion. And basically the standard here for whether a school can take disciplinary action under a code section like 48900K for willfully defying valid authority of a school, because that's what free speech is you're violating the orders of a school not to engage in the free speech conduct. The conduct itself must be, for them to discipline you in a valid way, the conduct must be disruptive to the educational process or violative of the rights of your classmates or other people. And here, the question of a naked man walking into a school, and I had a sheriff's deputy actually show up. We went to, after I taught Troy and his family on Sunday night how this process worked, basically what the laws are in California and what it is you can and can't do. We basically had these kids willing to go and get arrested. The kids said, yes, I will submit peacefully to arrest because I know that I can't be removed from campus and I know what my rights are as a citizen. And so he went to school on February 14th and he decided to sit down in class, remove his mask, and hand in an ultimatum that I had drafted. I've been working on for quite a long time, explaining the laws. And this was an ultimatum drafted by the attorney that I've retained now for all of these cases for these students. Her name is Tracy Henderson. She runs an organization called California Parents United. You can check them out at californiaparentsunited.org. I would recommend everyone doing so. It's a great organization as well. We worked on the cease and desist letter, essentially, for these schools, for these kids to hand in while they're engaged in this free speech act, to provide some context explaining this is the law. This is what the Constitution says. This is how you as a teacher, as a principal, as a school board trustee are violating my rights based on the California Education Code as well. And you have two options right now. You can either concede and drop the mask mandate, or you can take disciplinary action against me and we'll deal with it later in court. But we went so far as to say, basically, in this letter with Troy and with a few other students that we've done this with, as to say that we're not even going to comply with any of your orders. Like, if you try to suspend us right now, we're not going to recognize the suspension as valid. We're actually going to stay right here in class. And we're going to get our education as we're guaranteed by the California Constitution, as we're guaranteed by the California Education Code, free of harassment and discrimination under Code Section 201. Okay, that's California Code Section 201. Says the Civil Code section says or Education Code Section 201, says you have a right to an in-person education free of harassment or discrimination. The state cannot take that away from you. Okay. And the Civil Code Section 51 and 52, this is applicable to charter schools as well, says the same thing. So you cannot discriminate if you are a state actor or a charter school in California against a student who simply removes his mask. And the question here, going back to the disruptive conduct, is a man taking his shirt off in a classroom setting going to, exposing his hairy chest, disrupt the classroom process, the learning process? Is it violative of the rights of others in the class? The answer is yes. It disrupts the class because it's not normal. It's not something the students are relatively used to in that learning environment. It would be disruptive. But under the circumstances here, we're talking about an act where a student just takes their mask off. And the
So
question is,
I
sorry,
would
go ahead.
say, I would say is, me, I'm always devil's advocate, but as the prosecuting or defense attorney, I would say it is disruptive to take the mask off in a time of a pandemic when now the teachers, I think this is all driven by teachers unions, etc., but other students are afraid of COVID, and the norm that has been set for the past 2 years is to wear masks. And so the unmasking is equivalent to disrobing with the new standards of what's I would say sort of where we're at in the world with regards to COVID. So would that be a valid defense argument? Is that times have changed?
It doesn't
Yeah.
work. It doesn't hold water, unfortunately, for the devil's advocate position. We can get back to the disruptive thing first. We have to take a step back in the analysis. So once you've established that this is, and it's pretty easy to do, that it's a free speech issue, the next step is called intermediate scrutiny analysis. And so we're going to basically decide whether part of the questions for the jury actually in these cases is whether the policy, the mandate in question, is any more burdensome than essential to accomplish the government's goals relative to its burden on the student's right to engage in the free speech process. And so if there are, for example, and this is where you guys would actually come into play as experts here, the medical experts come in these trials, is the question for the jury is, all right, is the mask mandate policy for children, does it burden the student's right to engage in free speech more than other types of policies? That would be the question. What types of other policies are there out there besides a mask mandate that could accomplish the government's goals? And those goals, by the way, need to be clearly defined by the government. They can't just be, we're trying to slow the spread or quash the curve or whatever stupid thing that they come up with. It has to be, we're reducing, to be constitutionally valid here, it has to be, we're reducing COVID hospitalizations or deaths by X, Y, or Z. You can't just have an ambiguous objective and satisfy this constitutional standard. So,
and in kids, there's no hope in hell that that's going to happen because their incidence of the disease is so low. Excuse me. There was Paul Alexander brings this to note, and he is a tremendous expert because he can rattle off studies faster than, the guy that did the Rubik's Cube whilst skydiving. But he, and it was fascinating because he talks about, that gigantic study, which was during the initial wave, so when things were really bad, when New York was just, like hammered. And Sweden looked at over, I think it was probably that entire 2020 school year where they had no mask mandates, they had in-person education, and they looked at two things. Number one, was there way more incidents of hospitalization in kids? Nope, there wasn't, because kids don't get very sick from COVID. And then, of course, another just as equally important concept was, did it infect teachers? So were we killing teachers with little kids?
Right. And that's where I can see is the driving factor behind all of this is the, teachers afraid that they're going to catch COVID from the kids, wanting to keep the mask mandates in place at their place of employment.
And what they found was the teachers' infection rate was baseline. It was the same as the general population.
The whole mask thing that never worked.
Right. And especially when you get into kids like that's, kids for whatever reason didn't get high viral loads, so they didn't get very sick. Ergo, they did not transmit it very well. I mean, there was tons and tons of data to that effect.
It's like, do you know how many 7-year-olds pick their noses? Are you kidding me? Like, do you think that putting masks on a 7-year-old is going to do anything for COVID-19? Like, come on, folks. Like, this was the stupidest thing ever. I have little kids, and I just, the reason that I really freaked out about the mask thing was I realized just how scary you had to make the world to convince a child as young as 3 or 4 years, 5 years old, to wear one of these things in their faces all day. Because it's antithetical to what the child is used to and wants to do. Kids like to be naked. I mean, like they're free. Exactly. They want to run around. They want to interact with people. They want to learn. They want to grow.
I'm a child at heart.
You know what? I've heard some horrific things from people and seen kids that are 4 years old now who have, all their remembering years. I mean, I can't even remember back to when I was 2,
Yeah.
but you think of these kids and their formative years when they can remember all they know is wearing a mask. And I've heard of some kids afraid to ever take the mask off when they're around people because the bad germs are going to kill them. I mean, that to me, I mean, it's along the same lines as what you're talking about. It just incenses me that we've done this to children and that they're so afraid. I mean, adults too, but especially kids that think, that they have to wear these masks or the world isn't a safe place. And then on top of that, the fact that, we're layering it on with kids have to keep wearing these masks at school and all the things that affects their speech, their ability to read social cues from faces, people that I'm hard of hearing as it is, but let alone needing to like see facial expressions, lips, to interpret
We
speech.
have a lot of
I
kids
mean,
that have like auditory
yeah,
issues that are now having. I mean, we had the number of first off, let me just say that we get way more applications for help than we get support right now, and we need help to service these kids. We have hundreds of applications. Most of these kids have learning disabilities, and those are the ones who are affected worst by these mandates. The ones who are on IEPs, the ones like myself who have issues processing, who have issues learning, who have auditory issues, visual issues, who have autism. Those ones are the ones that we are getting. Kids with Down syndrome, even like just I have mountains of emails.
wow.
And
So you're telling me you're telling me a big government program is actually screwing the little guy? I never would have ever thought that was the case.
it's real abuse. Like these kids that I work with, like really are waking up with night terrors, and we have video evidence of this that we'll be putting out soon. These kids were bullied, told they were going to be killing people, told that they need to wear these things, told they need to comply. And a lot of it has to do with money. A lot of it has to do with the redistribution of wealth from the American people through government contracts at the school board level. And we can talk about that later. But these kids like Troy, that were brave enough to realize that this issue is so important, because the mask thing is not all that important when it comes to the grand scheme of things right now. There are bills on the table, SB 866 in California, SB 871, SB 1464, these COVID bills that are coming up that would, one, require children 0 to 17 years old in order to go to daycare or to get an education in California to become vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccine. That's required. That was introduced by Senator Richard Pan. He's a pediatrician, by the way.
No, of course
So
he
we
is.
can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, of course he is.
The other one would lower the age of consent for the vaccine to 12 for children in school. And then we have instances where kids are being bribed, candy, pizza, money, even in some instances, to get this. They're setting up clinics on schools for the kids to get them, and they're bribing them without repercussion. They have the last one would require public police officers and sheriff deputies in California to enforce public health orders, which is the most dangerous one, in my opinion.
Oh no, that's 100% the brown shirts, like all over
Yeah,
again.
no, that's the one
Right.
that we all need to really pay attention to.
And I don't want to trivialize something that was, one of the greatest, most horrific, events in the history of mankind. But you also have to understand that, what happened in World War II with Germany, and then eventually was Stalin, and then Mao, in the 50s and 60s, those things didn't happen instantaneously, and they happened because everything became about power, not about principle. And that's the point here, is that you're arguing these legal principles because they matter, because the Constitution matters, because that's what protects our individual freedoms. And then when it just becomes about power, then, the Jews are vermin and need to be exterminated. I mean, the whole rampant anti-Semitism in Germany started in the early 30s, started in like 1933, and it started as a public health problem.
Yeah,
Jews could carry diseases that could infect Germans that other people didn't have very often. And I mean, like, look it up. It's not hard to find this. And people think that, all of this horrible stuff in Germany started in 1938 when the war started. 1939, it didn't. It started almost 10 years before.
Let me get something real quick. Hold on. You're reminding me of something important.
Sure. What he's saying is that, we're talking about masks, but I mean, I'm going to pick on California, because even what's going on there,
California,
what's been going on in California with, the transgender movement and teachers supporting and pushing kids with hormone. You can get hormone therapies at school. You don't have to tell parents. I don't know. There's like a whole lot of moral and legal, where am I going with this? Legal things that just don't surprise me about California. I mean, the fact that you could have a teenager at school, and that school's letting them use different pronouns and treating them as a different sex, and then giving them
without parental consent,
giving them medical treatment with the hormones, and it's supported by the medical community as well as the
Can I just let people know right real quick? Planned Parenthood has shifted their business model.
Yes,
it's no longer about abortions. It's about changing your children's sex status. They actually had a tweet they put up and took down a while back because they realized how stupid it was. These people, it never surprises me, the idiocy of the left. They stated openly that their profit margin had shifted to like 90% from sex hormones. That's what they were making their money from now. In addition to the subsidies, of course, that they get. But yeah, it's all gross.
Wow.
And Bezos' ex-wife just donated, I saw it this morning on Twitter, $275 million to Planned Parenthood.
So it's not even about parenthood anymore. It's about,
it's about
kind of ironic, right?
Yeah. Well, they're brainwashing these kids. And the crazy thing is that you're hitting on another issue that I'm passionate about, the CRT, the having this trying to change your kids from boys into girls when they're not even old enough to consent into any contract, and doing that openly and trying to make money off it is gross, but it's where we're at in society. We need to start shedding a light on this and holding these folks accountable. But I really want to get back to the story with Troy and with these kids that have these disabilities, because they are the ones who have fallen behind the most. They are the ones who need the most help, and they're the ones that we are taking these cases on for. And so Troy on February 14th went to school and refused to comply with the school's mandates. He handed in this letter. It was drafted by myself and Tracy. And while this is happening, by the way, I'm in California. I'm outside of the school I'm hanging out with the students' parents, with Troy's mom for the day. And we basically waited because we knew that once he did this, they were going to call the sheriffs. And so we had called the sheriff's department that morning and tried to explain to them, and apparently they weren't receptive. In the long term, we can talk about that later, that what we are doing is we are helping these students engage in free speech. We are helping these. I am here to walk this student through the day after day, to assure that he is able to get his education as he's entitled to. And if you intervene, this is what I explained to the police, you understand, because of the way that you are dealing with the Fourth Amendment and the Civil Rights Act, you understand that I could sue you personally for money damages if you intervene. I don't want to do that. I like the Orange County Sheriff's Department. That's what I told them. I like the police. The boys in blue, the girls in blue are the good guys here. Like, I just want you to do your job, which is to not harass, not discriminate, just let the student get his education as he's guaranteed. And so they showed up in the morning because Troy had taken his mask off. The school, and going back to your question, what's more disruptive, taking a mask off or a man with a shirt off in the class? Well, the man obviously is going to be disruptive because it's not normal. But for the past 100 years in the educational system, even longer in just the education generally, but in the United States educational system, students have gone to school without masks on. And that's not been disruptive to anything. That's been the normal. That's been the standard. That's what we expect. You know what is disruptive to the educational process? Putting a mask on a student who has ADHD, putting a mask on students generally when they're trying to develop speech patterns as 5-year-olds, when they're trying to learn to read and write, when they're trying to, kids, I have stories of students who are forced to wear masks while they exercise. I'm not kidding. While they go running outside. Kids have fainted and have had cardiac incidents, have had all sorts of things that we're dealing with now.
No, we saw
that when we were in California.
Hold on really quick. This is
the Santa Monica Pier, and the cross-country team's running, and they're all wearing masks.
Yeah, it's gross. But here's the kicker that I really want to get back to. What is more disruptive? I'm going to ask the jury. What is more disruptive to the educational process? Is it the student removing his mask, or is it what Troy's school did and what a lot of schools are doing across the state of California in moving the entire class outside in response to the student taking his mask off? That's what they did that morning on February 14th. It was cold, but they moved the whole class outside because Troy decided to take his mask off. The principal and the vice principal came in the room and started harassing him that morning. And so he got on the phone with me once he took his mask off. He says, "Hey, this is what's going on. I'm being harassed by these folks. What do I do?" I'm like, "Hey, bud, I'm here for you. Stay with your class. Go back out. Follow them outside. Stick with your class. Go back to class. Get your education." And he did. And they called the police because he was still on campus and he had been now suspended. All right. He had been suspended. He stayed on campus. The police are coming. The sheriffs are coming. And they arrived. 3 squad cars arrived. So we go to the school. I'm actually at the school now with Troy and his parents, and with the sheriff and with the principal. And Troy is sitting outside in the quad. We can see him. We're speaking with the sheriff's deputies, and I'm having the same conversation about the sheriff deputies asking me, "What if I get naked and run around? Is that disruptive?" And I'm like, "You're not understanding the constitutional standard." And he's not listening to me for me to be able to explain it. Okay. I did not give him, I'm a 29-year-old attorney. I had earrings in. If you check the videos, it's kind of funny. I wore earrings for the first week I was in California. I did that on purpose. I spent a lot of time in the principal's office growing up when I was a kid. I've always been the rebel. I've always been the one that pushed back. And I know that if I presented myself in a particular way, and then I came across as very intelligible when I'm speaking with these folks, it would really throw them off. And so I did that. It was kind of funny because the principal became very irate when he told me that Troy was suspended. And I stood there with his parents and I said, "No, he's not. He's going to go back to class. Watch this." And I said, I told the police officers, they're there with us, the sheriff's deputies. I said, "Look, he's telling you all," and the parents are with me, by the way, that they've suspended this student. If he's been suspended, then he's trespassing. Go and arrest him. He'll submit peacefully to an arrest. And Troy even invited it, said, "Hey, please arrest me. I'll submit peacefully." The parents said the same thing. And they didn't do anything. The sheriffs actually just stood there and continued to speak with us while Troy's class was then moved back inside. And as they were being moved back inside, Troy was calling me and I was speaking to him. And he said, "What do I do?" I said, "Follow him inside." He tried to go back inside the building. As he's trying to go back inside the building, he's opening the door to the building. Principal Ezerati at Tesoro High School kicks the door out of his hand, kicking the door shut, actually assaulting and battering him right there. The sheriffs are too busy giving me the argument about how well, he's not engaged in free speech because I could get naked and we can take me off campus if I get naked, and not listening to the actual analysis I'm trying to provide to them, not willing to take the paper that I have for them to be willing to examine it so they can see for themselves what the law says. My goal there was to try and educate the police officers to show them so that they didn't get in the position. And now they have an opportunity in the sheriff's department. They've actually charged Troy. On the 3rd day of this, basically Troy sneaking into school, having the police called 3 days in a row on him, going into class. We actually, backing up a minute, on the first day after the sheriffs left, Troy got back into school after lunch. At this point, I'm above the hill. I'm above the high school on a hill with a bunch of kids from another high school, and we're protesting. We have signs, people are honking as they're driving by, and I'm on the phone with Troy. I'm advising him on what to do in these situations, and his mom is there with me as well. So Troy gets actually into his classroom after lunch. He sneaks in. Good for him, because the kid's about to be an Eagle Scout, by the way. He's a model student. Like there's nothing they can say about this student besides he's awesome. And his schoolmates are now supporting him. We can talk about that in a minute. But he gets in, and they again try to move the class out. And so he calls me and he says, they're moving the class out. What do I do? And I say, well, go with them. And he starts explaining to me that he can't get out of the room because the principal Azarati, and Vice Principal Ware are actually blocking the doorway. They're not letting him out of the room. And I say, he says, what do I do? I say, well, you got to try to get out. Put me on speakerphone. And so I explained to him, I say, hey, bud, is there any way out of this room? And he says, no, they're blocking the exit. I say, okay, this is what you're going to do. You have to try to get out of this room right now. I want you to do everything that you possibly can up until the point where you think or you anticipate they're going to physically prevent you from doing so. They're going to put hands on you, because if you take if you take any movement further, they're going to put hands on you. I want you to go up into that point while I'm on the phone with you here, while I'm on speaker, and I want you to start yelling it at me once you get there. Do so peacefully. Explain what you're doing. And I'm explaining to these guys, he's going to try to leave the room right now. And he does. He tries to leave the room, and they block him. They move to the right. They move to the left. They physically prevented him from leaving the room with his classmates. And as soon as I started screaming at them that they were falsely imprisoning this student, and I was going to take the keys to their home and their pension funds, they let him out. They were yelling at me on the phone as well. It was an exchange back and forth. And so Troy gets into the hallway now after being falsely imprisoned by these men. The Orange County sheriffs have left. And instead of walking around the student, and I'm off the phone here. We're going to try to get the surveillance footage for this, and I'm hoping that there's some strong evidence. Instead of walking around the student, Principal Azarati decides to walk through Troy on his way to his next location. He shoulder checked the young man in the hallway. The next day, the reason that Troy was late the next day, we filed a police report with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, explaining all of these instances of assault and battery. Nothing has happened yet. That's what we're dealing with in California. It's okay for teachers and principals and school board trustees to stick kids out in the heat, 90-degree heat all day, where they get sunburned and have to go home. These are 12-year-olds. To do that. But if a parent does it, they get CPS called, and then the kids get taken away. That's the difference that we're dealing with. And so when that happened, basically we reported to the police, nothing happened. This was the next morning. This was the 15th. We show up at school around 10 o'clock. Despite Troy being suspended, they had set up a dunce desk in the corner of each of his classes, complete with plexiglass around the outside of it. We have photos of this. So they were expecting him to be on campus because we had told them he was coming back. We told them the day before, like, hey, guess what? This is happening again tomorrow. And so we showed up, and after filing this police report and explaining everything, around 10 o'clock, Troy starts sneaking back into class. Throughout the day, he's sneaking in and out of classrooms, and they're kicking the class outside. I'm on the phone with him above the high school, and I'm advising him on what to do in these situations and I'm trying to explain to his teachers, like, hey, I don't want to do this, but you're about to get sued. So please let the kid go back to class as he's entitled to. Let it go. I tried explaining this to so many people. And unfortunately, this school in particular decided just to keep doubling down. They keep issuing basically these papers to him saying he's suspended. We don't sign any of these papers because they're contracts. They're suspension contracts. You should never sign anything in California if a school gives it to you without reading it very, very carefully, and sometimes trying to get some legal advice too, because you have a bunch of clever attorneys on the other sides of these things drafting them up. And they're trying to make them they're trying to obfuscate the fact that they're getting your consent to discipline your child. And it's a cleverly worded document, but that's the ultimate outcome. And so basically just day after day, we get more and more documents refusing to file to put these things in. But that was a cold day. I remember being outside the school. It was like 45 degrees that day. I had my down jacket on. And it was raining a little bit. It was an umbrella. In the afternoon that day, when Troy actually got into one of his classes, I think it's a business class for the high school, they kicked the entire, like when in high school sports, when you have a student that isn't following the rules or a teammate, and they would discipline the entire team, make everyone run wind sprints. Mm-hmm. They stuck the whole class outside in the cold and the rain in response to Troy taking his mask off in that class. And so we called the police to report child abuse, child endangerment under California Penal Code Section 273A. If you basically, as an individual, take actions that might or that basically might expose a child to risk of harm, whether it be from disease, whether it be from anything, it's pretty much child abuse, and it's a pretty liberally construed policy. And we're talking about 45 degrees. These kids didn't have jackets on, many of them, and they were all stuck outside because Troy didn't want to wear a mask.
I'm just like aghast. I'm like, first of all, like these educators, the principal, vice principal, and even teachers that are doing this. I mean, like, where do they feel that they're so empowered and entitled to run things like their way? And I guess, I would definitely be naming all of them individually in a suit as responsible, as well as the school board.
Well, I just don't.
And then, of course, then here's me, the justice side of me, I guess, coming out. I guess I'm an Enneagram type one. I don't know, but what about? I'm thinking then all those kids that were kicked outside to be punished en masse. Then I'm like, what are all their parents saying? Like, this is ridiculous. This has got to stop.
We're living in upside down land in California. It really is. Like, that's how nutty it all is. No one understands why it's happening. I do, and I'll explain it. I'll do my best to explain it here. It may take a little time. There's a lot to digest.
But I'm like, what are the parents and students afraid of?
What are the
teachers?
What do the teachers think they're gonna win?
I don't need.
I mean, this is like World War I. Like, you didn't have to fight the damn war for 4 years. Like, there's a point where you go, no one's gonna win this, because even if you win, you didn't win anything. Like,
let's take a brief moment. There's a lot of questions coming at me, and Dr. May, remind me to get back to.
Sorry, you got us riled up. You got us riled up.
Can we take a minute, because you're asking about what do the teachers have to win? I'm going to make a few notes here because there's a lot, and I can explain all of this.
Yeah. So the first thing is, obviously, with the fight back from the vice principal, the whole thing of taking the class outside and trying to evade Troy, and it's like, I think it reminds me of childish junior high, even elementary school, like running away. Oh, let's run away from the bad guy, and it's just, I guess, yeah. What do they believe? What ground do they think that they have to stand on, if they even have any, I don't know, thoughts?
Well, they're arrogant a lot of the times, and their beliefs about what it is they have the authority to do, based on their government position. And that's just the nature of it. Look, the sad thing is the people who go into these administrative roles, a lot of the times are the same kids in elementary school who are trying to boss the other kids to get back in line.
No, I know.
Those are the folks who are attracted to that type of work, unfortunately. But
this, as well as the teachers complying with this, do they not fear that they're going to be named in would it be a civil suit against them for their actions towards a student?
So I'll answer that question. Why are they unafraid of lawsuits? So basically what's happened here it's a really complex story, actually. And I think I need to come back to it here in a minute. I really want it because it ties into everything, and I can wrap it into the story as I go forward. But I won't forget about the question, what do the teachers have to win? I have that written down, and that'll come back here in a minute too.
Sure.
But so Troy, after being kicked out of class that day with his class and tormented by this principal, really is the principal, the vice principal, and some of the teachers as well. He was able to eventually we have pictures of the kids sitting outside without jackets on in this terrible conditions on the ground. They were eventually moved under like a canopy area and then into the cafeteria. And Troy snuck into the cafeteria, by the way, because he's just that great. MacGyver, and he's in there, and they finish the class in there, and no problem. He's trying to participate. He's being marked unexcused absences every time he does this, by the way. They're not permitting him to actually get an education. They ignore him intentionally in class. They're instructed to treat him as if though he's not there, which is completely ridiculous. It's changed quite a bit since then, and we can get to that. But so Wednesday, the next day, because of the child endangerment, because of the fact that these kids are being stuck out in the cold, we're again filing police reports. And so Troy is a little bit late again in the morning. The sheriffs are much less. They're more reluctant this time. They're starting to get annoyed. You can tell with the process. They didn't even take seriously the fact that these kids were stuck outside in the cold without jackets on. We called them that morning, again, Wednesday morning, to report the same thing, because when Troy got to school, they stuck his class outside again in the cold, and it was like 40, 45 degrees. The morning where you could see your breath in the morning in California, which is rare in Orange County, but it was that way. And so we were calling the sheriffs to come out to address this issue. And instead of addressing the issue, they decided to finally, after 3 days of Troy inviting arrest, basically, and inviting them to take action against him, decided to issue a trespassing ticket. And it's code section 602. We're handling that now. The trespass is not valid, but we are taking care of it on our own, and it's not going to be an issue for this. So the thing that we're most fired up about, though, is that I actually went and spoke I've been speaking at a lot of school board meetings. That night, the Wednesday night, it was the 17th, I spoke at a school board meeting, Capistrano Unified School District, and basically explained to these folks what it was that we were doing. We were going to be holding them personally accountable for their civil rights violations. I actually asked them as well, one of the things I begged them to do was to get a second legal opinion. All they needed to do was get a second legal opinion. At this point in time, just so everyone's aware, with a timeline, there had been up to 20 schools in school districts across the state of California that had dropped their mask mandates. They had adopted a school masking choice policy, or a district masking choice policy for their students. And so let's explain why that happened. So the reason that I'm so fired up about hiring Tracy Henderson as the attorney for all these kids is because she is a brilliant attorney when it comes to the California Education Code. Not only was she a litigator for 25 years on Wall Street, and just a wonderful courtroom advocate, she also is very well versed on California law. And so she realized that the executive orders, and she did this with a few other people as well. I don't want to give sole credit to her. I believe Pam Ragsdale, who's not even an attorney, had also came to a similar conclusion and was involved in some of this in the background. She realized that the executive orders, basically the foundation of all of the mask mandates in California, the two orders that were passed by Gavin Newsom, tried to waive what is called the Administrative Procedure Act, or the APA. He stated with his pen, Governor Fiat, a-hole, whatever you want to call him, just said, the APA does not apply to these orders, period. Like something along those lines. And that's funny because the APA, which was written like way long ago, 40 years or 50, I don't even know, it's been a long time, says that the only way it can be modified or changed is through legislative action. Well, last time I checked, Governor Newsom runs the executive branch, not the legislative branch. He has no authority as a legislator to change the APA. And so those changes, the executive orders, were never valid in the first place. And even more, you had the same time Gavin Newsom, and this is the biggest fraud in American history, and we can talk about this right now. We're getting to that point as far as the reason that these schools decided to adopt mass choice is because they realized all of this. Gavin Newsom runs two departments, or two state agencies at the same time. This is the California Department of Public Health, and then whatever, and I think it's the California Department of Education, but one other branch of government. I think it's the Education Department. It doesn't matter either way. We're going to sue whichever one it was. It's just, I'm blanking on it right now for some reason. I forget, there might have been another name. These two agencies, on the one hand, you have the strings being tied to school funding. So there were 3 rounds of funding that were released over the course of COVID-19, and they came from the federal government through these American Rescue Plans and the other legislative bills that were passed during COVID. And they went to the states, and then the states passed that money down to the school districts so that they could use that money for COVID relief purposes. Mm-hmm. In California, they were called the ESSER rounds of funding, ESSER. And on the 3rd round of funding, and by the way, these were for tens of billions of dollars each round. On the 3rd round of the ESSER 3 funding, the department in charge of distributing the money basically stated, if you want these funds, you want these this $15 billion, this 25 whatever billion dollars, you have to agree to follow the sister agencies' guidelines. So if you want this $15 billion, you have to agree to enforce the California Department of Public Health's guidelines. So you're effectively making them mandatory. All right. And at the same time, this is happening. At the same time, and this, by the way, this policy goes through 2023 or 2024. I don't recall the exact date, but it goes for a while. And it's incredible. Like you had to agree to follow this policy through this timeline to qualify for the funds. And so on the other hand, you have the California Department of Public Health, and they passed these school like masking COVID-19 guidelines, right? Including quarantine policies for students where if you got exposed, you had to be sent home for 10 days if you were unvaccinated, but not the other way. If you were vaccinated, you could stay on campus. 0 sense, right? But these guidelines were told, the California Department of Public Health went around to all of the school districts, the attorneys, they went around to all the school districts, and they told the lawyers in these school districts, these are mandatory. These guidelines are mandatory. They lied to them. The guidelines we're talking about never even tried to go through the APA process. Not only did he try to waive it from the executive orders, they didn't even purport to go through the process by which they would have had to go through to become a valid piece of
right.
Agency legislation, let's say. So what you had was, on the one hand, the agency who made these guidelines, they're telling people they're mandatory. On the other hand, you have another agency, co-equal, that is telling them they have to follow them for funds. And so they all bought into this hook, line, and sinker. And they've been making a bunch of excuses, as you said, why are they unafraid? What do the teachers have to win here? Well, the school district, the trustees have to win billions of dollars in government contracts that these private citizens who are elected officials get to distribute to business entities within their communities. And not only that, there are some nonprofit schemes as well where we're finding that these funds are basically just going into the pockets of these folks. And we can talk about that later.
It's the mob. I mean, basically, this is mob.
It's not just the mob. It's foreign countries as well. It's foreign interests that are involved here, and I can talk about some proof of that later. I want to do that on another podcast, though. It's a different sort of side story. Right. I've got a lot of stories to tell you guys.
Right, but I mean, this is like Pablo Escobar building apartments for everybody in Medellin, in the worst part of town, because then no one would snitch on him. Mm-hmm. So you always had places to hide out. And I mean, I've seen those interviews with people, and they go, the guy's like a doctor or a lawyer, great career. And he goes, I'm 50 years old and I have a mixed opinion of Pablo Escobar, because without him, I would have never left the streets. But with him, whoopsie. I mean, the guy was one of the greatest criminal masterminds in the history of the world. And
it's exactly happening in California.
It's exactly how it works, right? Like the government gives you money it's basically protection money to a certain degree to protect the political entities politically. And then you just go along. Like we've seen this in health. This is standard operating procedure in healthcare. Like the reason we have what we have, and there's no primary care doctors left because they don't want to tick boxes all day, is because these massive business entities that employ most physicians get extra money if you can coerce your providers into asking certain questions and data mining your patients, which is really what it comes down to.
It's not really
about
gross.
It's really it is, and that's actually why we both left primary care and then later left corporate medicine, because I said, if you do unpleasant things for money, that's called a job. But if you do immoral things for money, then you're a whore, and I refuse to be a whore.
I think I said
and
that
I would
one
be a
first.
I'd be a very unsuccessful whore.
Yeah.
But
know,
there's someone for everyone, is what they tell me.
Yeah. Well, there's a price. Everyone has their price.
Yeah, right.
Mine's pretty high.
Let's focus though on the two questions and tell you the story on how we got there. And you're right. This is all about government contracts. This is all about Pablo Escobar style mob redistribution of wealth.
Yeah.
And it was. Let's just get back to the story. So,
we're distracting. I know. Tim's to blame.
Where were we? I kind of got lost.
So let's go back to, we were talking about the teachers, how they are not going to be
you reminded me now. So
yes,
the teachers, what do they have to win? What are they like? Why are they doing this? Well,
I mean, I'd be going after them first.
So here's what happened in the story is the California Department of Public Health attorneys went around and told all of these school district and their lawyers, by the way, the school district attorneys, and the boards that these were mandatory guidelines. They had to follow them, and they believed them. They knew if they wanted the money as well, they recognized this. If they wanted the money, they had to follow them. And so they made them mandatory effectively. And not only that, the attorneys didn't do any research at all. It looks like they basically just as we have an issue of incompetence in medicine, we also have an issue of incompetence in law, especially when it comes to government attorneys or even corporate attorneys. A lot of times in-house counsel are a bunch of useless idiots is what I'm finding, unfortunately.
We know it well.
We've dealt with that before. And
bureaucratic attorneys are useless. And the fact is that these folks basically decided not to do any basic legal research into the foundational aspects of what they were being told from these higher branches, which is called malpractice, by the way. And this is going to be another issue of litigation in California coming from these cases where these teachers basically were told to take actions that were in fact illegal and in fact didn't have any basis in law. And now we're getting sued by people like me who are going to turn around and sue the attorneys for malpractice. And they should, by the way. They absolutely should. Because these people acted recklessly with respect to providing legal advice to clients. Even a first-year law student knows that when someone comes to you with a problem, you do basic research on the problem to understand whether the actions are legal or not. Like, that's so simple. And it just didn't happen. But what do the teachers have to win here? So here's another issue that is coming up. So many of the teachers don't want to be doing this. I've spoken to a lot of them. And some of them have started to protest, and some of them did take actions, and some of them are doing everything they can. They want to sue. They're actually being threatened by the teachers unions. I'm not kidding. Threatened by the teachers unions with repercussions. And we'll be bringing evidence of this forward soon as well. From some of our other clients that are out there. They're being told that they will be fired. They will be terminated from the schools. They will have, it will not be good for them. And we're dealing with that now. But the teachers have to win is government contracts again. So one of the things that happened as part of this, you got to remember who put the Democratic Party in California in power. And it was a large part labor unions. And there are a lot of public sector labor unions that are involved in these COVID disputes. And if we rewind back to when COVID happened, the schools in California, like a lot of the country, shut down. And to get the teachers back into school, they had to negotiate with the teachers unions, the labor unions, to make that happen. And as part of these negotiations, and this is what the attorneys for the school districts negotiated, they decided that they would offload their responsibility or their capacity even to reopen the schools, to make the determination of whether to reopen the schools. They were going to offload that responsibility to the local and state health officials. That was part of the negotiation. So now, whether or not to take the masks off of the kids has been left up to the local and state health officials. They abdicated their own authority to other people. And the teachers unions, the reason that Gavin Newsom set an arbitrary date of March 12th instead of just dropping the mask mandates in particular, and just letting it go, is because the teachers unions were using children's health as leverage in negotiating new memorandums of understanding or contracts with the school districts relative to COVID policies. They were literally abusing children for money. Your teachers, kids in California, don't give a dang about you or your friends or your development or your health. They care about money. And I got to go to a number of school district board meetings as part of my last trip to California. I left my family. I have a daughter that's just a few years old, another one that's just a few months old, and a beautiful wife. And I left them and I traveled and I spoke at these school board meetings in California a few weeks ago to go and try and educate these people on what they were doing to kids and represent my clients and explain to them what they had done wrong, with the hopes that they would drop these policies, they would change their minds, they would take actions, they would seek second legal opinions, things like this. In some instances, we've had some success there. In some instances, it's just resulted in school districts doubling down. And what do they have to win? They have to win money. The Placentia Yorba Linda School District, for example, I spoke at their teachers, their school district meeting a few weeks ago. And one of the things that I think she's the president of the school district. Her name is Carrie Buck. She's a school board trustee, the president of the trustees. She on the record during the school board meeting explained how enjoyable it was to have gone out the other week and taken these COVID grant checks in person, she herself, to the classrooms and handed these out to the teachers. She handed checks. She literally bragged during this meeting about how she was handing out money to the very people who put her in office. It's on the record. Wow. She's playing Robin Hood is what she's doing. And that's the same school, by the way, where I this was Women's Day when this happened. It was International Women's Day. As a father of two little girls, I'm sitting in this school board meeting listening to mother and father, one after the other, go up before the school board and tell these people, they're women on this board, that their daughters are having to hold their bladder for 6 to 8 hours a day because there are boys in the girls' bathrooms and they're too uncomfortable to use the restroom. Mm-hmm. That's real.
That's abuse.
And those are the types of issues that my organization exists to fight, because that's not reasonable. That's not a reasonable policy. It's for a very small minority group of people who my heart goes out to. Anyone who has gender dysphoria. It's a real thing. It must be really confusing and terrible. And I'm so sorry, but you're a very small percentage of the population, and your little bit of discomfort with this issue, and we should try to accommodate you the best we can, but it doesn't justify putting guys in the girls' bathrooms, because I'm a guy. I know what guys think about 90% of the day. And I know there are bad guys out there, just like there are in Virginia, in Loudoun County. That's going to happen. It's happening in LA. It's happening everywhere. And your comfort doesn't come at the expense, or isn't granted at the expense of my daughter's safety. That's not going to happen, and that we're going to fight that. So back to what we're doing here. They're just handing out money, and they're trying to basically, we're going to be going through discovery, and because we're suing these people personally, I am very excited to look into their finances. At one of the school board meetings I spoke at, it was at Capistrano. It was the second time. I was there from one meeting to the next, 2 weeks span of time. Actually, I think I may have taken a trip home. It was a lot of travel to and from California, all over the state. But I spoke at, actually, you know what? Let's back up and talk about civil disobedience for a second, because this happened the same day. So Wednesday, after the week of the 14th, the week, 2 weeks ago on Wednesday, you can check my timeline on Instagram if you want to know exactly. I actually flew up to Sacramento, one of these trips, and met with a bunch of kids in the Natomas Unified School District. And these are people that have reached out to me online, applied for help. And I've been working with one of the parents there, Rachel, for quite a while. And I met with parents and kids on a Tuesday night up there. And I educated them on what the California law says as far as what the schools can and can't do for these mask policies. And I educated them on the Constitution and their rights. And two of these children the next day, one Rachel's son and another young girl in high school in the area, actually brought these letters in and protested. The young boy in the morning, I actually went to the school with them, with the kids. He was asked to leave, and he's when you're yay tall, when you're in sixth grade, or I think he's 9. When you're 9 years old and you're looking at up at an adult twice your size, and they're telling you, and you're sitting in your seat saying, I don't want to wear a mask. They're telling you, put it on. And you say, no, thank you. And they say, get out of my class then. Well, you're not going to say, no, thank you. If you're half the person's size, it's really difficult.
It's very intimidating. Of course, it's intimidating. Yeah. Authoritarian. Yeah.
That's why Troy is doing what he did. He's doing it for the kids that can't do it. And that's why the kids that protested, Gabby down in Coronado, did what she did, because it's for the kids that can't do it, because they can stand up as young adults. And so this kid was asked to leave. And about an hour later, I'm still with the mom. We're going over to the other high school in the district because we're getting ready for another girl to engage in her protest. The school called. The principal called, who had been given this note, this ultimatum, on my website. You can check it out at thegavelproject.com. It's up there for the resources. She'd read it, and basically we got to the point where she was saying, well, your son wants to go back to class, it seems. And if you bring him back, we'll let him do so. And we will document it as we're required to do. This is what all of these schools realize, the 25 plus schools, the 30 plus schools and school districts now that have adopted mask choice resolution in violation of these mandates that were in place, the mandatory guidelines. All you have to do is document it, the protest, and send the kid back to class to be compliant as a school district for the money. That's what Roseville Joint Union High School realized. There's a woman named Shemaine Phillips that I've spoken with for quite a while, who was one of the first people to realize that in California. This is what Tracy Henderson realized. This is why we go with her, because she realized that all you have to do as a school to be compliant is document the protest and send the student back to class. And that's exactly what she said they were going to be doing. And so that happened for the young boy. He got to go back to school without a mask on. He successfully engaged in civil disobedience. And I taught him that. It was really...
So they're letting them back in school now,
and
they're
that
okay
district.
with it. So it's really not about the fear of actually catching COVID.
Of course,
No.
it's not.
It's not. I mean,
It's all
because
legal.
Yeah,
No,
It's all fear
and
of
the thing
being
is, like,
fined.
same.
it's just
But
all posturing.
I guess the thing I don't understand is I really do not understand having a 6-round revolver and putting 5 rounds in it and thinking that you're going to win at Russian roulette. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. And like, we saw this in healthcare with these gigantic health systems, and they're like, get vaccinated or get fired. So then you get people fired. You also send a message to the vaccinated people that, we have our knee on your neck, and don't screw with the administrators and the board of directors, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
When all they had to do is say, and I know some people that were courageous enough to do that. Actually, we did it in our own clinic. We said, look, we'll obey the law, we'll obey the rules, but all you have to do to obey the rules is you have to do some testing. You're in a healthcare setting. You have to wear a mask, and you have to have a religious or a medical accommodation on file. It's not hard, and some of these systems could have harvested. It would be like having 50 first-round draft picks. They could have harvested some of the greatest nurses, physicians, et cetera, from other systems. And they didn't do it just because they're like committed to this bizarre religion of whatever the hell's going on now. Like this wokeness
that has to do with another topic called ESG investing. And we can talk about that on another podcast.
Yeah, that's another whole, that's another can.
We can talk about that. That's actually the reason that all of these large organizations are acting antithetically to their own interests, and why they're acting antithetically to American society's interests. We can talk about that later, but
so I know some people have been asking me after I was linking some of the stuff you were doing after the last time you were on, but also from the Gavel Project as things were unfolding. Are you getting involved in any other states, i.e., Oregon, etc.?
Yeah, there's some opportunities for me, and I'm not able to comment on exactly what that is right now. There's
Uh-huh.
some. So let me start by showing you guys this flag right here.
Obviously, we link
This
your site. Go ahead. Oh, let's see the flag.
No, I'm not going to unwind it because I don't want
Oh,
anyone to think that I'm supporting any particular politician. I don't.
okay, okay.
But this flag is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was given to me by someone who is now my executive producer. Her name is Patricia Cavada. You can check her out at Strawberrini on Instagram. You can see her actually. She's linked to a few of my more recent posts. You can find her there. She gave me this flag, and this flag was something that she has been carrying around with her for a number of years in California. She's been protesting for a long time at the Orange County Board of Supervisors, at the state capitol, all over the state. She's a grassroots activist, and she now works for my organization. And she gave me this flag to keep me safe, because she held this flag when she was in Placentia, Yorba Linda a couple years ago at a protest, and Antifa showed up. And this flag was covered in blood because someone had been run over by a vehicle and their head was actually crushed by one of the tires. And she was holding this flag while she was praying over this person. This flag was covered in that person's blood, and that person lived. And what I'm doing, and my wife and I are aware of this, is not exactly safe. I've seen agitators come to events now. They didn't do anything disruptive, but they did. There is an organized presence in California of people who are trying to push a particular narrative, and we are going to identify them, and we are going to be suing them as well, because they are hurting people, and they have funds and they have resources. We know this. But I'm saying this because before I can go into these other locations, I need the resources necessary to take care of my family.
Right.
I have 5 cases right now, and I'm about to head back to California to travel all across the state and speak at school board meetings and raise awareness of what's happening to these kids, explain what has happened as far as the biggest fraud in American history with respect to this COVID funding being tied to all of these things, and the school board trustees as well, who basically played communist redistribution experts in their positions. And we're going to be suing them personally for tens of millions of dollars each, including the teachers and the principals, by the way, who are most egregious in their abuses towards these kids. My intent is to make the people who committed child abuse on behalf of the state of California homeless, because that's what they deserve, frankly.
Well, it's better than being homeless in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, at least there's a beach there for you still.
Yeah,
but
and other homeless guys to hang out with.
I think Antarctica is a good place for some people. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, so you guys know, I've retained an attorney now to take on. His name is Alexander Haberbush. He runs the Lex Rex Institute, which is our fiscal sponsor. If you donate to our organization, you do so through their website. If you go to my website, thegavelproject.com, you can find out actually exactly what we need as an organization right now in our needs tab. If there's an angel donor out there, if there's someone who knows someone with resources, please share this with them. We have the capacity to take tax-exempt donations. We're a nonprofit organization. We exist for charitable and educational purposes. And I connect children and people who have been harmed by bad actors, whether they be corporations or states. As long as it's a societal issue, we can take it on. And I connect folks with attorneys, because I'm a leader, and I know a lot of attorneys. I went to the top constitutional law school in the country. It's called Regent University School of Law, and I was class president. I know I can pick up the phone tomorrow and have lawyers ready to go in pretty much any state across the country for any of these issues that we need by just accessing our alumni page. It's really simple. We raise money to hire lawyers to take the cases that no one else wants to take. And that would be the reason I'd be going up to Oregon. And we have a group of people up there that I've been speaking with, and I'm not going to comment any further on the specifics, but we intend to hold tyrants across the country accountable. And that's what we do as an organization. And we're totally transparent as a 501c3. You'll be able to see where all of the funds go. I pay myself a salary, by the way. We don't take any contingency fees, by the way. If you're wondering, our clients don't pay for representation. We are suing for tens of millions of dollars, and we're not going to get a dime of that unless they decide to turn around and give a donation at some point. So this is not about the money for me. This is about helping kids, and this is about helping people get justice for the harms that have been done to them, because our society is really jacked up. But the Constitution is a weapon, and I know how to use it. I'm trying to educate people on how to use it as well, so that we can all get together and start holding everyone accountable who's being an a-hole in society.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to encourage everybody that's, asked us, or is, listening, that wants to step up and, is like, yeah, this is something we could use in our area, to go to your website, get involved, make a donation, and yeah, reach out as well. It's like a two-way street. And I know that just one person at a time can make a difference. And so that's what I encourage everybody to do.
Thank you.
Because unless we all start doing a little bit, like nothing will happen. But
because most people, like we get in, we were in California wine country, and, I stumbled upon a conversation with somebody who prided himself in being super progressive. And it's fascinating because a lot of these principles they get, like everyone gets this when you break it down into their pieces, right? Like they have, everyone has their own, whether it's, you're a minority, or you're homosexual, or whatever. Like, you need to be protected against bullies from way back when, but it's the same. It's the same principles. The reason you don't discriminate against somebody based on race is also why you don't do unscientific nonsense mandates for children that are at essentially zero risk of significant harm. Then it's child abuse. Like, this whole COVID thing drove me completely crazy. This is back in March or April of 2020. I would be ranting about this. How come no one is looking at total risk mitigation? They're only looking at COVID risk mitigation, not total risk mitigation. Like, it doesn't matter if you wear a seatbelt and you have, good airbags in a brand new car, if your tires are completely bald and you're driving 150 miles an hour. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And common sense has just been destroyed.
It's bad. And it's something that is the reason I quit my job. And it's the reason that, really the destruction of the American dream is what you're getting at. And I think that everyone is a little bit homesick right now. And I just want to really quick, before we close, explain to the people what I've done to try and get to this point. I've helped kids engage in civil disobedience successfully. I've spoken at school board meetings where the trustees, who are attorneys, by the way, have quit the next day after understanding our position. And we're going to be suing that person personally as well. That was in Capistrano Unified School District. Please go to my Substack, the Gavel Project.substack.com. You can learn everything that I'm doing right there, in my Instagram as well, the Gavel Project. I've spoken at school board meetings. One of the ones that I went to, and I'll finish with this quick story. I went to Saddleback Unified School Board, the Saddleback Valley Unified School District board meeting a few weeks ago on Thursday. It was my last day in town in California. And I didn't realize when I got there that they draw names out of a hat when they pick speakers, and they draw. They're only going to draw 10 names out of this hat, and there were like a lot of people there for public comment. And I prayed about getting selected, and I was one of the 10 that got to go speak.
Yay!
Actually, not only that, Patty. Patricia, my assistant, who's a public speaker as well, got to speak. Two Gavel Project people.
That is awesome.
The Gavel Project out of the 10. And I explained to these people that these kids now eat lunch in what's called a jail. Their friends call it jail because they're in an outdoor bike rack area every day. They have been for the month of February. And they eat lunch, and they watch all their friends through the fence eating lunch. They sit outside in the heat all day. They have truancy letters from the district attorney. The sheriffs have been called to harass the not these kids in particular, but kids all over the state of California. And right now, these other agencies, the DA's office and the sheriff's office, DA Spitzer, you have the ability right now to do the right thing and to drop these truancy charges against these kids who've done nothing wrong, and you know that. You're an attorney. You can understand the law. I mean, you probably didn't even know these things went out. So just do the right thing, get rid of them, and let these kids wipe the record clean. And then for the sheriffs, do the right thing. Stop showing up when they call kids that are protesting. Stop harassing these kids because the vaccines are coming. We're going to be protesting those too. I'm actually going back to educate these kids how to engage in civil disobedience so that when the vaccine mandates come, they know what to do. And I'm going to be fundraising. I'm leaving my family for about a month. And you know, I quit my job because I want to protect my daughters. I want to protect the American dream. What's the point of having a job as an attorney, a great job as an attorney, if you can't give to your kids the same freedoms and liberties that you enjoyed as a child? What's the point of saving for a future? That's why I spent my wife and I, just to wrap this up, we spent way too much money on this nonprofit. I haven't had a paycheck since October 8th. And, you know, we're fiscally responsible people. We were blessed enough to have me work hard enough to go through law school debt-free. I was blessed with a huge scholarship. I went through undergrad debt-free as well. At one point, I worked 3 jobs to get through. I'm a hardworking person. That's who my wife and I are. And we put everything we had in the savings account into this nonprofit, including checking accounts too. We've liquidated vehicles to start this to go so I could go fight for kids in a state that I don't live in, to help kids I don't even know. And I'm doing this because I think it's necessary to help my kids, but it's just, this is America, and kids are being abused, and I'm a father, and I'm not going to stand for it. And I have the capacity to do something about it. And I'm not afraid. I'm just going to keep fighting until we make real societal change. And that's what our organization exists to do. So please support us. I'm going to go back, and it'd be great to have someone sponsor me before then. At some point next week, I'm not going to say when, but by the way, I've also, just real quick at the end, I invited Gavin Newsom to charge me with whatever mask mandate ordinance I violated. I've been in the state since October. I've been traveling around teaching kids how to protest. I've been speaking at school board meetings. I've had a wonderful time out there doing this, and I'll happily provide you additional evidence, Gavin, and whoever your attorney general is, or whatever school district I've trespassed in for being unvaccinated indoors without a mask on, or wherever business. I don't care. Let's go to court. Let's fight these things out. Let's decide on a constitutional basis what it is that we, the people, have the right to do. And let's ask the people of California to make that decision in these jury trials. And if you want to support that fight, you can do so by visiting thegavelproject.com, reading the instructions there on the needs page, figuring out what we need and supporting us that way. So please, I'm trying to do this on a shoestring budget at this point. Don't have anything left. We made it through a rough spot, but we're going to be able to keep moving forward. It'd just be really nice to do so without having to worry so much.
Yeah.
At the foundation, we just need some support. Anyway, I got to go.
We don't.
Well, let's get you some.
We don't. I don't have much to add. I could, because I always have something to add, but I think you summed it up wonderfully, Ryan. And we will definitely meet again and discuss. We'll have to do like snort lines of Prozac when you start talking about ESG, and then the real devil.
I think I'll skip that one.
Which is the central bank digital currency. That one absolutely gives.
Yeah, we can talk about that. We can talk about the Fed. We can talk about BlackRock. We can talk about all of the fun stuff, and we need to do so. Actually, I'm writing a paper right now. I'm doing some additional research. I think I found the way, and I'll leave a cliffhanger here. Jeez. I think I figured out how BlackRock hijacked the business schools across the country and brainwashed people within corporations into buying into the situation that we find ourselves in now. And be writing something about that in the coming weeks. So you can expect that soon.
Yeah, when that's done and out, then we'll definitely have you on and promote it.
Awesome.
All right. We'll link all that in the show notes once again.
Big hugs.
Yeah.
And hug those littles for me, because
Yes.
he's got the cutest little girls.
Oh, yeah.
And a beautiful wife. So he's in a sea of estrogen, and so he needs a little testosterone to get his organization going.
We have actually been to Ryan's home and had dinner with him.
Yeah.
It was wonderful, and met his lovely family.
I know.
Like I said, a lot more courage than most of us. But even if all of us just get, as Jordan Peterson would say, 1% more courageous a week, that's 52% in a year, and that's I hope inspiring to people.
Hey, I am the product of Jordan Peterson. I read his book while I was in law school, 12 Rules for Life, and I knew a lot of that before then, and I've been living out those principles. But it's a great book for anyone who's interested. And by the way, Jordan, if you're out there, I'd love to talk to you. And anyone else who wants
no kidding,
please reach out to me. I need to get some exposure so I can help these kids. So please, if you're out there, you have a platform and you want to have me on, reach out.
Wow. It was really super exciting to talk to somebody that's so passionate about what they think is right. And
obviously you didn't pick up on his emotion and passion, and I was so moved. Him breaking into tears by how, like, he's really seeing what's happening to these kids and how it's fully impacting, and hopefully it's reversible, but the language changes, the learning disabilities that it's just if they haven't had them already, developing.
Well, and it's so mind-blowingly selfish. When in the history of mankind have we done something to children that its only net benefit is a negative benefit, in other words, harm to children, for the sake of old people? Like that is completely not. But that's completely nuts.
But the lie was, it wasn't just for old people; it was for everybody, to protect the kids from the long-term effects of COVID.
No, so we'll make sure that we give them long-term learning disabilities and whatnot. Like, this is just, we could go on and on. We won't.
I think we said enough during the interview.
Yes, people need to remember Whitney Houston. I believe the children are the future.
Are you?
And let them show the way.
Really?
Well, it's true. I make light of things that disturb me.
I just don't feel like laughing, but I just want to end and have people remember to reach out to Michael Relvis at MR Insurance, where their goal is to assist physicians on obtaining the most comprehensive coverage available to fit their unique situation. Reach out for both excellent and quality service to his website, mr-disability-insurance.com, and I'll link it in the show notes as well.
All right, we'll see you next week.
See you next time.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.
Honestly, I married a foul-mouthed truck driver.
That's what you get when you marry a Canadian girl.
That's right.
With a little spice, sarcasm, and stubbornness, you're screwed. I can't
believe he's driving in the left lane that slow, eh? Holy shit, get out of the way, would you?
I heavily audit all my words for this podcast. But I need to use my Anna Delvey accent because it is much better and drives you crazy.
Yeah, it absolutely drives me crazy.
I'm getting rid of the Canadian accent and using this one, but I think I got a little Irish in there.